so welcome. And today we have two exciting speakers from the Evergreen State College in Washington State. Mark Rosemeyer did her undergraduate work at University of Wisconsin-Santa Cruz. She then went on to do a master's at Arizona and a PhD at UC Santa Cruz looking at mulch systems in the tropics. She's had a long career in terms of doing international work. She spent about 8 years leading study abroad, tropical biology and tropical agroecology trips in Central America through the Organization for Tropical Studies, which is run through Duke University, through University of Wisconsin, and through the University of Santa Cruz, University of California-Santa Cruz. So while she was in Central America, she was involved with the MOIST program here at Cornell. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. That's the Managing Organic Inputs to Soils of the Tropics group, which is run through CIIFAD, which is a Cornell Institute for International Food, Agriculture, and Development. So she has been at Evergreen for about 5 years now, and she was telling me today that working on all of these field studies has really informed her practice as an educator at Evergreen, because she feels that hands-on and problem-based learning is important to get across the students. So she's been at Evergreen for 5 years. She's involved in the Center for Ecological Living and Learning, which is a loose affiliation of students and faculty and kind of a learning community at Evergreen. And she's taught several different classes there: farm to table, community food systems, and ecological agriculture. And she's here to talk with us today about some of the programs at Evergreen. And maybe I should introduce Mary Ellen too. Wow, okay. So Mary Ellen Donaldson is originally from Maine. She started her undergraduate work and then she did a 2-year apprenticeship with MOFA, which is the Maine Organic Farming Association, right? Okay. She worked there with an herbalist and with lots of different growers for 2 years. And then after that, she did for about 3 years, worked as a landscape gardener with the Liberty High Daily Gardens here in Ithaca. She also studied at the Northeast Botanical Medicine, and she was involved in the Master Composter program through Cornell. And she last year transferred to Evergreen to study sustainable agriculture, so she's here to tell us about her experiences. Here's Martha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allison. Really appreciate the warm welcome on this frosty day. Leaving Olympia was hard. Finally, the hummingbirds came back, the daffodils were blooming, and so there's hope for you all. It will just be a little while. So what I'd like to talk about today is our program, Facilitating Sustainable Agriculture at the Evergreen State College, particularly looking at learning communities and student self-direction, both of these factors. So I'm just going to start sort of with the end. What would student success look like? What do we want our students to be able to do at the end, and then sort of work backwards? So we want them, of course, to be able to understand complexity, to be good problem solvers, to be able to work at a systems level, to be able to work in groups and teams with local community, and to be able to contribute positively in an increasingly complex world without being overwhelmed. There's a tendency to, with all the complexity and all these different factors, particularly when you're dealing with problem solving at a larger level, that this kind of all of these different factors can overwhelm students. And so being able to work with that in a positive way is, of course, really important. So there's two sorts of aspects. There's content and then there's process, what we teach and how we teach. And one of the things that I feel is very apparent to our students is that we've got a systems problem. And one of the systems problems, one of the major ones, is our dependence on energy, as well as lots of other aspects of the modern agricultural system. But when we think about where we've been and where we're going, we're at the cusp of this change to a economy that needs to move into non-fossil fuel based. And so because of this change, And it's apparent to our students, and they of course push us to move more in that direction. And it's true for both conventional and to a lesser extent organic. And organic systems do of course use less energy, but we think of the entire food system, and you think of still there's lots of fossil fuel energy that goes into organic systems the way we currently do it. So when we think about developing sustainable systems, we need to think about place-based, information-intensive systems, and that's going to take a different kind of education than what we're providing now. The problem is an interdisciplinary one, and it needs a system solution. So how do we form people? How can we encourage people to move in this direction? And that's where higher education, I feel, has a real role to play, not only in agriculture, but the entire society. How are we going to make this big change? And there's a discussion as to whether we're over the peak or we're at the peak for peak oil, but we need to really think clearly about this. So at Evergreen, we have different methods of teaching. So that's sort of process or content, where we're going with the content. Now look at process. Evergreen State College it's a publicly funded liberal arts college. So it's kind of a rare breed. It's not, of course, a land grant school. It's got a different mission. And the student takes basically one integrated program in terms of structure. The student will take one program, will take 16 credits in a quarter. Sometimes these quarters or these programs will last more than one quarter. So ecological agriculture, for example, is 3 quarters long. So we have the same students for 16 credits for 3, essentially an entire year. So you get to know them pretty well. We use interdisciplinary teaching teams. We emphasize hands-on learning. We are working on linking theory to practice. Individualized learning as well is very important. And even within these classes, we are able to tailor certain projects. Our students have, they can elect to do papers or certain projects that are along the line of what they're specifically interested in, as well as learning contracts, and Mary Ellen will be talking about those. Learning communities is one of the major foci, and certain courses are more, follow more this method than others, but what I'm saying, agriculture is one of the strongest, and we really see that the development of the community aspect allows students to go places both in terms of their breadth and depth that they're not able to do when they're only working by themselves. I've really seen that this last year. It's really impressive. They're able to, because of the strong community aspect that we've been able to foster over time, there's been more and more student learning, more engaged student learning. And when we take this at an institutional level, it's been recognized as one of the top schools in learning communities in the United States, and also in the National Student Engagement, and it was one of the top 20 colleges for academic challenge as well as student engagement. So the comment here is that, and I think this is really apt, that we're working on creating a culture that fosters student success through these learning communities. And more and more the idea of culture, a culture of learning. How do you create that? This is sort of what I've been dealing with, especially in this last year. And of course, where we're going doesn't really have a blueprint. We're feeling this out. Love to hear feedback and ideas on how to teach this kind of thing. How do you teach a systems perspective? We're working, sort of muddling our way through it, but it's exciting. It's an exciting path. And when we're thinking about the skill set, okay, we talk sort of in general, what we want them to be able to be problem solvers, engaged citizens. What kind of skill set do we want? It seems simple, but just good skills of observation are not all that common. I think when people were living on farms, you spend a lot of time observing, but when people are used to the fast-paced web culture, a lot of times if it isn't told to you or shown immediately, you don't sort of use your skills to observe the natural world. And so I think that this has got to be a basis for this, especially when we're talking about an agriculture that's based in place. Every place is going to be different. You're going to need to listen to your particular place. Critical thinking, how do you analyze your analysis skills? How do you do that? How do you take an argument, analyze it, and speak to it? Holistic and systems thinking, fostering that. Creative problem solving, reflection, quantitative reasoning, and articulate expression both in the oral and written realms. And as I mentioned before, working with groups, engaged citizenship, all of these things I think are important. So the question is, how do you put this together in something that's going to work for your students? And this next slide is a little bit of a confusing slide, and it's, as I say, well, actually not this next one, but the one after, is putting this all together in the context of these three courses. But I thought I'd better tell you what these courses are, and then, to look at the skill set that we're trying to pull together within these three courses. Ecological Agriculture, a system perspective, is a year-long course, as I mentioned, 3 quarters. It's taught by 2 faculty. We have 50 students. We spend a lot of time on energy flow, nutrient cycling, on-farm exercise. So there's our systems perspective, get people on-farm, talking to farmers, and looking at some of the basic ecological principles manifest through their farm. And so they begin to pull those things together. How do you work in community? Policy as well, engage citizenship. And right now students are writing letters to congresspeople. They don't have to send mail. Become familiar with that form. They're not scared. Usually there's a big, hump to go over. 5 out of maybe, 50 people or so say that's a routine for them. That's something that they do often. But to have a vital and vibrant democracy, we need people that are engaged citizens. And so helping them write letters to the editor, there's a skill involved, and how can the persuasive writing themes, right? But it's another thing then to write for the editor of your local paper. And we also look at alternative structures for U.S. agriculture. So we've got a whole history. Our first quarter is the history of U.S. agriculture, and second quarter is where we go. So we look at a series of books, usually 5 or 6 books per quarter. So on top of their science coursework, and let's say policy coursework at certain quarters, they're also doing this whole sort of social science piece, and they read books and discuss them. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Practice of sustainable ag is the hands-on on the organic farm. So one of the questions was how we're using the organic farm in the development of our sustainable ag courses. Particularly the practice of sustainable ag is most focused on that. And then the farm to table is our beginning course, so to speak. It's only 1 quarter. The practice of sustainable ag is 3 quarters as well, but as you'll notice, it's spring, summer, fall, whereas eco-ag is fall, winter, and spring. Some of the people in eco-ag do go over to practice of sustainable ag as it warms up and we can do more outside. With farm to table, it's food system. It's a little bit more of the social side, and it gets into some of the political economy aspects, and really broadening the idea of what it is to be an agrarian. Usually when we think of agrarianism, we think of farming only, but it's being increasingly redefined by groups of people to include the urban consumer. And I think that that's really important in terms of making the changes that we need to make in our agricultural system is to bring those folks in, especially now that we only have 1 or 2% of people on farms these days. Okay, so these are our 3 sorts of structures, and then how do we fit in this? Okay, this is confusing. As I say, we're in the this is the kind of slide you should never show, but I just wanted to say we're in the process of trying to figure this out. So it's a little messy, but I think, hopefully this will be somewhat clear. We start off with observation and listening skills, and that, of course, is the basis for all these different aspects. As we particularly go into the implementation, we want them to have basic ecological concepts, basic social science concepts, and those eco-ag especially is a little bit more heavy on the ecological, but it has the social science, as I mentioned. Farm to table has more social science. Practice of sustainable ag, here's our toolbox. We not only want them to have the theory, but we also want them to have the practice. And with practice of sustainable ag, you've got the agronomic horticultural toolbox, so to speak, and you've got socioeconomic and policy and eco-ag, and also practice of sustainable ag, looking at engaged citizenship as well. Experimentation. You want people to be able to experiment on their own farms and in their own lives and understand what that means. Also, as you're reading papers, to know the amount of work that goes into writing and well, doing the experiment itself, writing it up, getting it published. So we work with them on some basic skills around that as well. Widening this out, and this is something especially with the CEL, the Center for Ecological Living and Learning, we have the built environment. We have a course at Evergreen called Ecological Design. And at times we've tried to put our two courses together, as I tried fairly successfully, but you know, these are, as I say, it's a process. And because we ultimately want to unite the built environment with the agricultural. And I think that this is an exciting path of exploration, I'll put it that way. And at our farm site, we want to be able to do more with actual building. This is a light green because we don't have this course yet. This is something that I think is really missing. Like we have the practice of sustainable ag, we need to practice of sustainable building. We've got students going all over and learning about building cob houses and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it would make a lot of sense to be able to integrate that into a broader approach, because this is not just agriculture, really. It has to do with our entire way of approaching an entire modern society, really, which is based on cheap oil. Okay, so when we look at core practices in learning communities, as I was saying, learning communities are a major way that we approach teaching and learning at Evergreen State College. You can see all these different aspects of it: community, diversity, integration, active learning, reflection, and assessment. And I'm going to go through these various categories, particularly looking at interdisciplinarity, which is interdisciplinary courses. How do we organize that? How do we do that? Because I know that that's a concern of you all here. And we'll bring in some of these other factors as well. I have to go quickly here. Okay, community. I'm starting off with community because I think this is a major piece. As I say, this has been a wake-up call. We had a professor who was visiting us from the University of Minnesota, Steve Simmons. Maybe some of you know him. And he has particularly been a community piece. And he sort of held up a mirror to me that said, "This is what you're doing. Is you're creating community." And it's like, oh, okay, that's exactly. You know, he just really helped me see this piece. And, you know, you know sort of intuitively that it helps, like potlucks, eating together. That all helps, but it's another thing to really, I think, practice it consciously. And, okay, I'm not going to go through these details. I just looked at the timer and looking at diversity, not only of different subject matters, but different modes of learning. So that's where the hands-on comes in. We do lab, we do field, all different kinds of things. And when we're talking about interdisciplinarity, we're really looking at integrated courses here. There's lots of other different kinds. Multidisciplinarity basically is where you do a tag team approach. One professor comes in with one subject, another comes in with another. What we do is we have all the professors there the whole time so that then you help the students synthesize a whole lot better. There's different other ways of doing it, clustered courses with a common seminar. So various universities are experimenting with these clustered courses around a defined theme or question. One university I want to mention, University of British Columbia, they've actually done a problem-based learning approach for all 4 years. They dissolved the departments in their ag school and actually have one department, and they're working on problem-based learning. So that might be a model that you guys might be interested in checking out. Okay, and field programs, of course, are integrated by the nature of being in the field and tackling questions. Integration, we try to facilitate this through the students writing synthesis papers, through integrative questions on exams, and I think through seminars, students really speaking, being able to articulate their thoughts, and that helps them integrate their ideas. As I mentioned, some of these things, but I'm going to have to whip through these a little bit. The learning community environment supports interdisciplinary problem solving, and I think part of this is because it's less hierarchical. There's student-faculty co-learning. The community itself becomes a safe place to learn, and it's that safe place is more and more apparent to me that by creating that, you're really helping people come to grips with their own ideas and be able to articulate them to other people. So it really supports diversity, and when we're thinking about really problem solving, we need to look at a participatory stakeholder approach, and by them learning to articulate their thoughts in an environment like that, it helps them then be able to do that in a larger framework. And I particularly saw that with our students at I met Alice about that. Multiple roles of teachers. So teachers then become co-learners, they become facilitators of students' educational experience. Reflection and assessment is another part of this, and Mary Ellen's going to talk about her portfolio and how students use that tool as a tool of reflection. So we have them do various other things too, like papers where they think about where agriculture is going and what their part is in it. So they reflect on themselves, what are my skills, what do I want to do, and how do I become a part of whatever I see the future. And so several students, many students have me that was a very helpful exercise to just sit down and do that. And that's a reflection. We also have this evaluation system where we meet with students and they write evaluations of us, we write them of them, etc. Active learning is a key component with projects. So exercises on farm. As part of the Farm to Table, that's the beginning sort of program. We teach gardening, organic gardening down at our community farm. We have done rapid market assessments for the community food systems class, and field trips to farms. Here we are, actually last week, Yellow Worm Farm, Pierce County Compost Factory, and we have fairly extensive field trips. I know you've heard from Ricardo Salvador, who was talking about the 10-day one in the summer with Iowa State University. We usually do 4-day field trips in spring and fall, and then 1 day in the winter because that's harder to get around. But this year we did a 4-day field trip to a conference, the Eco-Farm Education Pre-Conference and Eco Farm Conference, and it was, for me, a rewarding experience to have our students participating, articulating their thoughts in this larger framework and contributing to this. Very exciting. And there's Allison to the right with two of our students doing a report back from a student group in terms of their opinions on where things were going. A lot of field and lab exercises, and again, here's where we use the organic farm. For example, we tested pH on a grid system across the organic farm. So we've got microbiology, compost. We have a compost facility on campus. In our labs, there's an emphasis on group data collection and interpretation. The cell, okay, so Allison mentioned the cell, and basically this is where our organic farm has grown to. We've got all these different aspects of the cell: community garden, permaculture site, farmhouse, compost facility, biodiesel facility, medicinal and herbal garden. These were all student initiatives, and they are overseen by a farm manager at this point. We have a pretty small area, only 2 acres, that's actually commercial production, so you get access to larger. Lots of different courses use this facility, including organic chemistry, where they grow different kinds of garlic, running through a GC, look at the flavor compounds and the peaks in that, and do some identification, as well as, I mentioned most of these. The commercial horticulture on the farm here, let's see, practice of sustainable ag. So this is the 3/4. They sell the fruit in an on-campus farm stand, CSA, also to the food service. And it's an integrated plant and animal system. So I'm more and more convinced that to have a sustainable system, it needs to be diversified. We need to have animals as part of the whole process in terms of internal nutrient cycling and also their potential to do work. So I would say 10 or 15 years ago that might not have been possible. People have, militant vegetarianism has receded a little bit, I'd say, at least at Evergreen. We have a compost facility, and this was the old days, but we have a whole vermiculture state-of-the-art situation now. So food goes from the organic farm to the food service, which is Aramark at this point. We did have Bon Appetit, that's another whole story, and produce compost within the organic farm. Allison asked me to do a little update on the Farm to College program. We have a student intern working with Aramark so that now 20% is either organic, local and organic, or local. Still need more work on that, but University of California-Santa Cruz just had a 3% requirement, so 20% actually looks pretty good. Right now they're buying as much as the organic farm wants to sell, and so we're in the process actually proposing expansion of the organic farm, partly for this reason, but partly for other reasons. Also, we have a remodeling process of the food service kitchen that is in design right now, and so the students are working really hard to set up a processing kitchen. In other words, I don't know if you folks have heard about Ann Cooper, but she's done a lot of work on Long Island actually setting up, it was a public school kitchen that was able to then process food from local organic in the summer that then they use for the entire school year. One of the things it's got to do with storage. So when you're thinking about modeling, we're trying to put this in, and the students are really about doing it, putting in a teaching kitchen as well, because as people are before, but if you teach somebody how to grow kale, that's one thing, but it doesn't do them too much good if they don't know how to prepare it and eat it in a way that they like it. So, kale is one of the things that really grows well in our area. State-of-the-art compost facility, forced air reactors. We're also doing vermicompost, and we hired a faculty member, Steve Sherrill, who's specifically working with this, and is going to be looking at compost science really strongly, writing a plan for the vermicomposter, etc. Biodiesel is again student project, and producing the diesel from our tractors. One of the problems with all of these has to do with continuity, and that's why having staff or having your programs well integrated into using the facilities is key to their maintenance. And I think probably more than anything, having faculty continuing their support would make a difference. One of the problems with Demeter's Garden is that it hasn't had as much faculty. It hasn't been integral to our curriculum, and so it depends on student clubs, and then there's good organizers for a while and a lot of work, and then it kind of falls off. So I'm not going to go through the detail if you're interested. I do have a 3-ring binder here that has the specific curriculum and syllabi for these courses, and you're welcome to take a look at them later, exactly how we do this. Okay, this to me is how we're developing the curriculum at this point. And I think one of the things is really to listen to the students and listen to their vision. It doesn't mean that we're trying to actualize everything that they're saying they want, but our role in this is helping them make their ideas, these ideas, or tell them it's not possible, it's certainly nothing's going to happen. And so to kind of help them get the tools that they need to facilitate the changes that they see need to be made. That's really, to me, it's this co-creative process. It's not that it's immediate feedback, but it's, I think now about things that I heard a couple years ago that were ideas that the students had. And I'm okay, there's continuing curriculum challenges, systems thinking. The balance between breadth and depth. We're using Brady and Weil in our soil science. That's it. The students need that depth, and it's not. We're not using Baby Brady. We're using the full edition, but we're kind of the elements of crop resistance. So we're it's an intense text, but students need to do it. So again, it's the balance of breadth and depth. And here we are doing math. So fundraising is another challenge, and I think it's not just our students. I think it's all over public schools have, let's say, the last 4 years not quite have done the same job with that. Faculty challenges to interdisciplinary. Faculty members need to respect each other's discipline and get along. This sounds basic, but it's not always the case. At Evergreen, social science and natural and agricultural sciences don't always see eye to eye. Different groups feel marginalized by other groups, so they can come into a relationship with this feeling too. So there's a little bit of complexity there. Faculty have the focus, how much are you willing to take on that's sort of not a field that you've been trained in depth in? And there's a balance there again. How comfortable are they as being a co-learner, as a being the sage on the stage? These are all big things. And then the university structure, I was at University of Wisconsin for 4 years, and we were working on starting the agroecology curriculum there. One of the things that and talking to people at Iowa State, the university structure, it can really impede or facilitate interdisciplinary courses. Also, Allison mentioned that you folks might be interested. What do our students do? We've got people that are managing farms. They're managing farm projects with an education focus, at-risk youth, that kind of thing. Starting farms and nurseries, working as agency personnel for, let's say, the Soil Conservation Service, going to graduate school. It's not Soil Conservation Service anymore, but our Thurston County District or other districts that are involved with that, with conservation. How do students put a course of study together? So Mary Ellen is going to be documenting her travels, and so she's going to give you the real inside scoop as to what happened. So Mary Ellen, thank you. Sorry to speak so fast. I think that was, if you want to see any specific part, you have to talk about.
I'll take this time to announce speaking of creating community, we're having a potluck potluck tonight. If you'd like to meet with the speakers, and hopefully I brought snacks.
So good morning. I'm Mary Ellen Donaldson. I'm a senior at Evergreen. I've been studying with Martha Rosemeyer in sustainable agriculture courses for the past 2 years. And she asked me to kind of unpack my portfolio. Every term we put together a portfolio that includes all the work that we did in our program. So I brought a couple of them if anyone's interested in taking a peek at how those get put together.
We're passing around.
Yeah. Most of it's in Spanish. So on the phone with Julie Grossman, she asked me specific questions that you might be interested in. Why is Evergreen unique? Martha went over a lot of this. And I guess, what I really wanted to say is, for me, it really has to do with community. So we have potluck, we work together, we wash dishes together, we cook together. We have all of our classes together because we don't have separate disciplines. We have one program. So you've got 57 students, 50 students, meeting 4 days a week, meeting credit hour limits to each other, and then we support each other's learning. So it really gets away from the individualistic, competitive attitude of students in community. So, and the class community also engages us as in society. It's like practicing in society, but we practice in the classroom. I've just kind of gone over all this. Team teaching is another really important point. We have faculty teams of 2 to 3 faculty who teach together, and in that way they really begin to cross disciplines. Even interdisciplinary is like teaching between the disciplines, but transdisciplinary is full integration across disciplines at once. So if you had the social, environmental, and economic aspects of a triangle in sustainable agriculture, we're really teaching in the middle so that these things begin to come together. And also something that's been really seminal is the mentoring relationship that happens at Evergreen, where students have really close relationships with their professors. And there's wisdom that's passed on, and basically mentoring helps ground student visions in reality. So even though I feel like I'm a generally idealistic student, I can understand how sustainable agriculture and the global food system fit into my life and how I can participate in creating a food system that I want. So learning in class community, again, classes are held all week. And this is a photo of our class this week on Tuesday in lecture. You know, we have lecture, we have lab, we have these different segments, but we have it all together. This is cooking together and washing dishes. Another thing about potluck is that it's basically intrinsic learning about our food system. We begin to reflect on what tastes good, where's it coming from. You know, it's not that cool when someone goes and buys juice at the store and brings it to potluck. You know, it's a lot cooler if it's like, hey, I picked up carrots at the local farm. So, you know, we start to call each other on our ecological focus. Team teaching has been so seminal in our education. These are our professors, Martha on the left and Steve on the right. And it sets an example for the class in terms of collaboration, and it totally moves away from the individual, like I'm lecturing to you, but let's interact. This is our class on Egypt, Santa Cruz, at the EcoZone conference. So, just wanted to cover the mentoring relationship, and in that mentoring relationship, we become reciprocal members of a self-critical learning community. And students can check faculty and curriculum. If we don't like the way that a class is going, if something doesn't feel right between the two teachers and how they're working together, students can write letters to faculty. We can hold meetings with them about how to solve those issues in the class community. And another question Julie asked me was, how do I learn at Evergreen compared to traditional colleges? So I transferred to Evergreen from Smith, and I feel like there are a bunch of different factors about how Evergreen is different. Main things that I wanted to talk about, this is from a book that was given out at the Facilitating Sustainable Agriculture Education Conference in Santa Cruz, California this January. And this chart goes over different ways of learning, specifically like scientia, technique, and practice. So the theory in this chart is going over the focus on learning about something, and scientia is learning for knowing it. And the techniques that go along with that are things that you learn to do. And then the praxis, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's bringing them all together and talking about human development of the student. And the teacher's role in these areas are expert, master, and facilitator. And then kind of the student's reflective questions for self involve, what do I know, what can I do after this class, and who am I becoming in the world? And so for me, Evergreen really has to do with class community, student-directed learning, which is we can design our own course of study. There are no requirements. It's really about purposeful challenges and creating a toolbox for how to be in the world. And then there are the programs or the individual learning contracts. And writing a learning contract involves creating your own curriculum for the term. How many papers am I going to write? What books am I going to read? What books does my mentor recommend? Where am I going to go? And then the mutually educational student-teacher relationships, where the teachers and the students are both learning and teaching at the same time. So some of the things that I have done have been my internship in Nicaragua, working in sustainable development, and also eco-ag is one I'm taking right now. Last year I was in a course that Martha taught called Community Food Systems in Nicaragua, examining the food systems in those two countries and then going there. So. Julie also asked me how social science gets integrated into the natural sciences. And for me, that really has to do with the systems approach, looking at the integration of the agroecosystem hierarchy from cropping systems, farming systems, regional systems, to the bigger ideas on the globe, and how those things are fitting together. And then field work is also in the class. It's regional. We take field trips. It's national. You know, we went from Washington State down to California for EcoFarm, and it's international. You know, we travel to the tropics. So these are photos on the bottom from Costa Rica Integrated Farm, WSU Extension Center at Washington State University, and then here at EcoFarm again. So a systems perspective basically means that the global problems that we're looking at are systemic. So it's appropriate to think about not only the natural systems, but the social systems and how those two things are evolving. So education for global problems demands an understanding of the underlying ethical attitudes of our actions. One of the most critical challenges in restructuring natural science-dominated curricula is incorporating ethical and aesthetical dimensions of learning. The centrality of values emerges in a curriculum based on a systems approach. And values are not a separate category of the mind, but arise out of a comprehensive understanding of reality, our worldview. And what I really think we're doing is that we're learning our own ethics by erasing competition in the classroom. So we understand that we each have our own goals for our lives, and we can support each other in finding these goals and building a toolbox with which to create them. So the worldview created by community. This is the community food systems class on top of Volcan Mombacho, which is in Nicaragua. So Martha's there in the middle in the black jacket. Educating for something, in addition to educating about something, that goes back to that chart, and thinking about what are we trying to get out of this? Where are we going? Who are we developing ourselves as people? And so educating for something is essentially political and has to do with democracy and participation, and that involves the classroom as well. Education for sustainability should include a focus on transparency and power relations between teachers and students, between different political worlds, different sides of thinking, communicative competence of participants, diversity of perspectives, values, and interests, equal opportunity and access for everyone, room for creativity and space, education as human development, and diversified methods of teaching and knowing. So this is some of the international fieldwork that's gone on. It's the community food systems class in Costa Rica and Nicaragua at the Wilson Botanical Gardens in Costa Rica. And this is my internship in the National Union of Farmers and Ranchers in northern Nicaragua. I was there for 6 months working in sustainable development, promoting local marketing systems for the farmers. So the kids would always follow me around. This is a sugarcane farmer. He actually doesn't own any land anymore. He's severely indebted. So for me, this internship really began to have me reflect on social justice as a student and development, and really transformative experience in terms of a global understanding of food systems. Again, just a little more about the National Union of Farmers and Ranchers. There are 34,000 farmers. I was working with in a unit of 4,000 farmers, and specifically with 100 farmers, so 10 groups of farmers in 10 different villages, looking at local food system marketing strategies. And how are students learning better because of this? So, again, I've said this before, but I think a lot of it has to do with community, and how we support each other as friends, and then how we can graduate and form a network and maintain those connections. And the learning community supports our personal human development and our own reflection, our own worldviews. And so that the ethics are back in education, or at least we're learning for who we want to be to create sustainability. Just some things for thought. What might work for Cornell? Julie specifically asked me. So I don't really know, I'm a beginner. I know Cornell's relatively structured in terms of coursework, and I know that breaks up in the higher levels of education at this university. But some of the things that I think helps break that up that I've heard from Allison is class community. So study groups, group projects, community outreach projects, which place a focus on the class success instead of the individual success. Not that individual success isn't important, but to bring together the class and to, if there are those of us who aren't learning as well or are having trouble with coursework, to teach each other, which involves a student learning how to teach. And educating for something, in addition to educating about, and human development, and diversified methods of knowledge and knowing in terms of mentoring. So, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.